Good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim, as we continue reading Flying Against Time, a Ted Scott adventure. Chapter 4, A Sinister Suggestion. Brewster Gale started as he sensed the significance of the looks and words of his sons. If at first he seemed about to protest, he thought better of it and ruminated thoughtfully, the evil scowl deepening on his brow. "We'll fix him," declared Greg. "He'll never win that wad," added Duck. "How about it?" Greg asked his father. "Are you in with us on this?" "What have you got in mind?" asked his father, but with no shadow of reproof in his tone. "Nothing definite as yet," replied Greg. "It just occurred to us how frequent accidents are in this world. No one knows when something is going to happen to him. If his auto goes wrong, he may be flung against a tree and break his arm. If he's walking down the street, a branch might fall on his head. If a weakness develops in his plane, he may fall to the ground. In the dark, he might trip over something. Life is full of uncertainties." "Sure thing," replied Duck, "and Ted Scott is just as likely as anyone else to have an accident happen to him. Of course, if he did, we'd all shed bitter tears, but it couldn't be helped. All we could do would be to send flowers to the hospital." Brewster Gale said nothing. He chewed savagely on the end of his cigar. "You don't seem very enthusiastic about these possibilities," Greg said to his father. "You didn't used to be so squeamish." "It's simply that I'm doubtful of the rough stuff," replied Gale. "Let an accident happen to Ted Scott, and it would be in the next edition of every paper in the country. In no time the place would be swarming with reporters, and they'd examine the cause of that accident with a microscope. If this accident, as you call it, should occur, it would have to be a very cleverly managed accident." "Don't you think we're clever enough?" asked Greg truculently. "No, I don't, to tell the truth," answered Brewster Gale shortly. "He's put it all over you every time you've run up against him." "That's good coming from you," declared Duck angrily. "I don't see you wearing any medals from your encounters with Ted Scott. He's licked you to a frazzle. You admitted it yourself." There, don't let's quarrel," put in Brewster Gale hastily. "Let's bring all our guns to bear on Ted Scott instead of on each other. Just this minute an idea has popped into my head that may be worth something. Draw your chairs closer and I'll tell you what it is." The news of the proposed contest spread and was printed in the local paper the next morning. The big press associations were quick to see the news value in it and telegraphed it to every newspaper in the country. It caught the imagination of the nation, and for the next several days it was an almost universal subject of animated discussion. Opinion was divided as to the possibility of the feat being performed. Of course, the fact that Ted Scott was the one to attempt it inclined most people to consider it as good as done. They had seen him try so many difficult things and always come through with flying colors that they refused to entertain the idea of failure. There were others, however, who viewed the matter more dispassionately and pointed out the almost insuperable obstacles Ted would have to overcome if he were to win. The weather was one, the failure of the plane another, the distance to go and the great average speed that would have to be maintained were others. If he failed to conquer a single one of these, he was lost. At one point there was a universal agreement. That was that the conditions were too hard and that the bet unsportsmanlike on the part of Ferdinand Sipp and his friends as regards to sickness or disability. It was pointed out that if such should prove to be the case, the bet ought either to be called off or the contest deferred until Ted recovered. Much graver still was an angle of the case brought to the attention by an editorial in a large New York daily. Walter Hapworth discovered it and brought it to Ted. "Read that, Ted," he said, pointing to a paragraph of the article in question. That special paragraph read as follows, quote, "Not only is the stipulation regarding sickness or disability unfair, but it is positively dangerous. It places a premium on violence. It is a direct incentive to bring about deliberately that sickness or disability that would lose the race for Scott. We do not intimate for the moment that such a thought would be cherished by the gentleman who made the bet. They are men of the highest standing and wholly beyond suspicion. But it might be remembered that the interest engendered by the race will make it a big betting event. Thousands will back their judgment with their money, and excitement will run high. If this were confined to individual bets, it would not greatly matter. But suppose a ring of professional gamblers should raise a pool of several $100,000 and bet against Scott. They could easily find takers. Then suppose, and the supposition is not incredible to those who know the habits of these gentry, the gamblers should decide to make sure of winning by simply putting Scott out of the running. We advise Ted Scott to be extremely careful, and we earnestly hope that the wager may be so far amended as to exclude this obnoxious feature." Unquote. Ted dropped the paper and stared at Walter. "I never thought of that," he exclaimed. "I didn't either," admitted Walter. "You can be sure that if I had, I would have kicked at the clause. I think I had better see Sip and the other fellows and try and get it taken out." Ted pondered for a moment. "I don't think I would," he said. "I've never backed out of a contract yet, and I'm not going to begin. They'd think I was getting cold feet, pleading the Baby Act. If I had any kick coming, I ought to have registered it before it was put down in black and white. But I didn't, so I'm going to stand by it." "That's all right as a general thing," said Walter. "But this is a matter that may affect your health and even your life." "Yes, that at least is possible," agreed Ted. "At the same time, I'm going to stand pat. That is, as far as my own personal bet is concerned. Of course, you and Paul are in this too, and I don't want to interfere with anything that you may feel your own interests require." "We'll stand by you," was the reply. "If Sip and his crowd are real sports, they'll propose that of their own accord. If they don't, they won't hear a peep out of us. All the same, old boy, I can't help being worried for your safety." "That's mighty good of you, Walter," said Ted warmly, "but don't let it worry you too much. I'm going to pull through this thing all right. Most of my enemies, Fellwig, Hardwick, Cost, and the rest, are in jail anyway," he added with a laugh. "You're forgetting a couple that were in jail but are no longer," remarked Walter Hapworth significantly. "Oh, you mean Gregg and Duck Gale. And Brewster Gale himself. He's as bad as either of those sons of his. Worse, if anything." "I'll be on watch," promised Ted. "Come along with me now over to Aeroplant. I've got to get started on that new plane of mine as soon as possible, and I want your advice." "You've made up your mind, then, that the Browning won't do?" asked Hepworth. "Not for a test like that," returned Ted. "She's a dandy old girl for most things, but she hasn't the speed. She was never designed to make 200 miles an hour. Of course, it will be only on rare occasions that I'd ask the plane to do that, but I want her to be able to when I call upon her." "I thought that perhaps you might put extra motor in her and get enough additional speed that way." "No," replied Ted. "Everything about her is built in harmony with the speed she was originally designed to make, about 125 an hour. The whole plane would be thrown out of balance if I installed an additional motor. I think I'd be better to have an entirely new plane built from stem to stern." "You've got mighty little time to do it in," observed Walter Hapworth doubtfully. "I know it," replied Ted. "I'd far rather have 3 months than 6 weeks. But they've promised over at the plant to put in 2 shifts, and if necessary 3 on her, so that I'll be sure to have it in time." They left the hotel and went over to the plant, where for the greater part of the day they discussed plans and pored over blueprints in the company with the most skilled engineers and mechanics on the firm. Walter Hapworth left first to fulfill an engagement, but it was quitting time when Ted left the works. The men were pouring out, and Ted found himself the center of a group comprising his closest friends and old associates. "No keeping a squirrel on the ground, old boy," said Mark Lawson as he clapped Ted on the shoulder. "I see you're in another contest. How many honors do you intend to cop, anyway? Aren't you ever going to be satisfied?" "Why should I be?" laughed Ted. "The man who is completely satisfied is dead, from the neck up at any rate." "Looks to me as though this were the toughest job you've tackled," put in Brake Lewis. "Most jug-handled thing I ever saw," remarked Bill Ellison. "If it were anyone else than Ted, I should say they were asking him to do a thing that is impossible." The word impossible isn't in Ted's dictionary, laughed Mark. Go to it, old boy. We'll all be rooting for you. Thanks, said Ted. I guess I'll need all the rooting I can get. I've got my work cut out for me. You'll make it all right, declared Brick confidently. I'm the seventh son of a seventh son, and my gift of prophecy is working overtime. We're going to make up a pool among us and put it on you, Ted, at any odds we can get, declared Jack. And we'll put every cent we can beg, borrow, or steal into it, added Mark. I'm flattered by your confidence, replied Ted. All the same, you're taking risks. 100 things might happen to prevent my winning. We're not worrying, said Mark. I'm already figuring out how I'll spend my winnings. I know 2 fellows who won't be betting on Ted, remarked Brick, pointing to a pair that were passing along the adjoining street. Greg and Duck Gale, laughed Mark, as he recognized them. No, it's perfectly certain they won't be putting any money on their dear friend Ted Scott. I thought perhaps they'd learned their lesson, observed Jack. But they're the same rotten pair they used to be, and are loafing about as before in the lowest joints in town. That's too bad, said Ted regretfully. I hope they turned over a new leaf. They've always done all they could to injure me, but I haven't any malice against them. Well, they've got plenty against you, observed Mark. Do you know what I heard they were saying the other night? What were they saying? Said Ted. That there was going to be the biggest funeral Bromville had ever seen, replied Mark, and that Ted Scott was going to play the part of the corpse. Really? Laughed Ted. Now that's interesting. I've no ambition to play that part. Of course, they were fooling when they said it. Likely enough, said Mark. But it's when men are fooling that they're apt to give away their secret thoughts and hopes. Well, threatened men live long, stated Ted, and I guess I'll prove the truth of that proverb. Let's hope so, replied Mark. All the same, Ted, you want to sleep with one eye open. I wouldn't put anything past that pair of skunks. And that's the end of Chapter 4. Next week, Chapter 5, A Narrow Escape. Sounds interesting. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.